everyone, this is Susan here, and today I'm going to read another one of my all-time favorite stories. It's called The Ox Cart Man, and it's written by Donald Hall. And Donald Hall was a very famous poet who lived in Danbury, New Hampshire. And he wrote this story about a farm family about 200 years ago who lived in New Hampshire and could have lived very close to where we lived. So if you can imagine 200 years ago, this is what life was like in New Hampshire. In October, he backed his ox into his cart, and he and his family filled it up with everything they made or grew all year long that was left over. He packed a bag of wool that he had sheared from the sheep in April. So I have a bag of, this is actually wool from a sheep from my friend Sue Lander from 3rd grade in the Effingham School. She gave me actual sheep wool. So he packed a bag of wool from the sheep that he sheared in April. He packed a shawl his wife wove on a loom from yarn spun at the spinning wheel from sheep that she sheared in April. So we're going to imagine that this is the shawl that she wove on the loom from the wool that was sheared from the sheep in April. He packed 5 pair of mittens that his daughter knit from the yarn spun at the spinning wheel from sheep sheared in April. He packed candles that the family made. He packed linen from the flax they grew. He packed shingles that he split himself. And he packed birch brooms that his son carved with a borrowed kitchen knife. And these are our birch brooms. They were very important for the dirt floors in the homes 200 years ago. Put those in there. He packed he packed potatoes that they dug from their garden. But first, here's the potatoes, just imagine. But first, he counted out potatoes enough to eat all winter and potatoes for seed next spring. So if you have potatoes at home, the seeds from the potatoes are really what we call the eyes, and once the eyes sprout, you can actually take this potato and plant it. If you have one at home that looks like this, throw it in the ground when it's warm enough, and a plant will shoot up, a big green plant. After a long time, if you dig down, you'll find potatoes growing. But they saved enough of those seeds for the next season. He packed a barrel of apples. These are our apples. He packed honey and honeycombs, turnips and cabbages, a wooden box of maple sugar from the maples they tapped in March, the maple trees, when they boiled and boiled and boiled the sap away. He packed a bag of goose feathers that his children collected from the barnyard geese. It's a bag of goose feathers. Here's the picture. And when his cart was full, he waved goodbye to his wife, his daughter, and his son, and he walked at his ox's head for 10 days. Over hills, through valleys, past farms and villages. So he walked all day long for 10 whole days, until he came to Portsmouth, the Portsmouth market. Some of you may have been to Portsmouth. You can see that it's on the ocean, and there's a ship here in the harbor that must have sailed here from England. There's a lot of businesses there. So he sold his bag of wool. Just gonna have to get it out. He sold the bag of wool, And he sold the shawl that his wife made. He sold that. He sold 5 pairs of mittens. He sold candles and shingles. He sold birch brooms. He sold potatoes. He sold apples. He sold honey and honeycombs, turnips and cabbages. He sold maple sugar. He sold a bag of goose feathers. Sold his feathers. Then he sold the wooden box that he carried the maple sugar in. And he sold the barrel he carried the apples in. Then he sold the bag that he carried the potatoes in. Then he sold his ox cart. Then he sold his ox and kissed him goodbye on the nose. Then he sold his ox's yoke and harness. With his pockets full of coins, he walked through Portsmouth Market. He bought an iron kettle to hang over the fire at home. And for his daughter, he bought an embroidery needle that came from a boat in the harbor that had sailed all the way from England. So he bought her, I don't know if you can see, there's a needle so she could embroider. And for his son, he bought a Barlow knife for carving birch brooms with, so he didn't have to borrow the kitchen knife from Ma anymore. And for the whole family, he bought 2 pounds of wintergreen peppermint candies. And I used to bring these with me to the school. These are not the original type of peppermint candies, but these are what peppermint candies look like today. So I'm just going to use this can and then give some to the kids, and they would understand that that was a big treat 200 years ago. Then he walked home with the needle and the knife and the wintergreen peppermint candies tucked into the kettle and a stick over his shoulder stuck through the kettle's handle like this. He would balance it on his shoulder so the stick would help distribute the weight, and coins were still in his pockets. He would walk past farms and villages, over hills, through valleys, by streams, until he came to his farm, and his son and his daughter and his wife were waiting for him. And his daughter took her needle and began stitching. And his son took his Barlow knife and started whittling. And they cooked a dinner in their new kettle. And afterward, everyone ate wintergreen peppermint candy, a big treat. And that night, the ox cart man sat in front of his fire, stitching his new harness for the young ox in the barn. There is the young ox. And he carved a new yoke, and he sawed planks for a new cart. And he split shingles all winter. So he's beginning to make another cart, and he has a young ox that will grow in the next year. While his wife made flax into linen all winter, and his daughter embroidered linen all winter, and his son carved birch brooms all winter, and everyone made candles. And in March, they tapped the sugar maple trees, and they boiled the sap down. We still do this today. That's how we get our maple syrup. And in April, they sheared the sheep, spun yarn and wove and knitted. And in May, they planted potatoes, turnips, and cabbages, while apple blossoms bloomed and fell, while bees woke up starting to make new honey. And geese squawked in the barnyard, dropping feathers as soft as clouds. And that's really what farm life was like. 200 years ago, a whole year would pass and it would start all over again, like he said, with the new young ox, and he'll make a new cart. They'll grow more produce. They'll collect more feathers, and they'll do it all again the next year. Pretty interesting. But for now, that's our story for this week. And I'll see you all again soon. Bye-bye.